of with stories of incredible acts of terror, yet incredible acts of courage and resourcefulness and ingenuity. And so Eve is the granddaughter of survivors, and as all of my children are. And so they grew up very close to their grandparents, and they grew up feeling so much empathy and learning so much about all the trials and tribulations that the Jewish people have gone through. So Yom HaShoah is also termed as V'Hagvura, and it means the day of remembrance and the day of catastrophe and of heroism. And it was 82 and a half years ago that the war started. And it's unbelievable to remember, to reminisce about so many things that happened. And at the end of the day, my mom, Aleha Shalom, and my mother-in-law, and my father, and my father-in-law, they all said they survived by miracles. And I'm going to be featuring a family that also survived by miracles. A lot of the Jews in Europe, we know a lot about Poland because that's where my parents, my in-laws came from. But a lot of the Jews, they didn't believe what was happening. They didn't believe that they would be taken out of their homes. They didn't believe that they would be taken out of their businesses, that the businesses would shut down, that the Goyim would take over their homes, would take over their businesses, that they would be confined to a ghetto, which was just a few streets, and there were hundreds and then thousands of people who were living in the ghetto, who were living 8 people to a room, very, very little food, much disease was rampant. Lots of people could not survive in the ghetto. Lots of people died in the ghetto from disease, from starvation. The Nazis, and unfortunately, a lot of the Polish people, the Ukrainians, a lot of the people were big collaborators with the Nazis, and they followed their instructions very, very well. I just recently read that in Denmark, there were 7,000 Jews in Denmark, and the Nazis wanted to go in there and kill them. And actually the government and all the people of Denmark, they didn't allow the Nazis, and they hid them. And there was not one Jew killed in Denmark. And that was quite amazing. But unfortunately, just in Poland alone, over 3 million Jews were killed. And there were only 3,300,000 Jews in Poland, and over 3 million were actually killed. So anyone who survived was truly a miracle. And Eve and my children and me and my husband, we are here because of those miracles, because our parents survived. I would like to say, as I said before, a lot of people went to the ghettos. A lot of people were put in cattle cars, and they were taken to concentration camps. And many of those camps were killing camps, and they had the crematoriums. They were gassed, and then they were put in the crematoriums. And it was something inhumane. It was unbelievable that any people should ever go through something like that, when all Hitler wanted to do was annihilate all the Jews. So today I am featuring a family of 38 people that didn't go to the ghettos, that didn't go to the concentration camps. They had an amazing mom, and she was Bubby Esther. And she said, I am not going to the ghetto. Whatever they tell us to do, we're going the opposite way. Let's find somewhere where we can hide, somewhere, a cave, anywhere. And so before I start telling the story, I'm going to show you a little video clip. It's a news clip of this family. Julie?
I'm sorry, can everybody see it?
I can't see it, but can they? I cannot see it.
I'm
No.
having trouble with my screen share. Give me just a
I
moment.
can't see it.
Okay.
Okay, this worked great just a minute ago.
I see it now.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The story about the power of a mother's love and will to save her family as the terror of the Nazis descended. Several years ago, an explorer made his way deep inside a cave in Ukraine and discovered artifacts, signs that someone had lived there years ago, but who? Well, the answer is recounted in a new documentary called No Place on Earth, about a family that holds the world record for surviving underground. They lived there 1 year and 146 days, and they were not adventurers. They were simply people who wanted to survive. Here's ABC's Terry Moran.
In the darkest days of the 20th century, as the shadow of the Holocaust fell across Europe, for a few Jewish families in a little Ukrainian village, the courage of one woman was the difference between life and death for her two sons.
If I wouldn't have this type of a mother, I wouldn't be alive.
Esther Sturmer, mother of 6, understood that to save her family, she would have to do something unimaginable.
We had a very smart mother. She told us whatever they told you to do, you do the opposite.
Saul and Sam Sturmer remember how their mother Esther took them and 4 other families underground. 38 Jewish men, women, and children would spend a year and 146 days deep inside 2 vast caves. They lived in darkness, in fear of being discovered. One man from each family would sneak out at night, risking his life to forage for food. They built showers and latrines, collected drinking water from a lake inside the cave. They made the dark abyss a home.
You are in paradise.
You were in the cave, but free.
Free. We were free men. We were not afraid.
Finally, in April 1944, the Russian army liberated the area, and the 5 families, 38 Jews, came back into the light, back into life on Earth.
That ordeal, living underground for 500 days and more, how did it shape your life? The life that you did survive to live?
We were just happy to survive, and then life started to turn normal. And
this is a completely different story, because it was a happy ending.
In 2010, for the film, Saul and Sam, now 92 and 86, returned to the cave.
Now I know where I am. Let's close all the lights for a minute. No, I feel good.
And deeper into the darkness, a symbol of their resilience, where the families etched their names in the rock to signal to the world, we are here.
Here I am!
Today, these 38 survivors now have more than 125 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, reminding us of a Hebrew blessing, which means more life, their reward when they came out of the darkness. Terry Moran, ABC News, New York.
Okay, so it's quite an incredible story. and it's also a story of survival and so much joy after the terror and the fear and the horror. They had so much joy when they finally emerged from the cave. So would you like to show the slideshow now? Okay. This is a little bit of a slideshow of the family and of their experiences, of their adventures.
The story about the power of a mother's.
So you see, they lived in Koroka, and that was in the Ukraine. It says Poland, but I think it was very close to the Ukraine. Okay. Next. So the Germans arrived in 1941 in their town. And most of them were sent to an extermination camp or they were killed. So at first they were in bunkers that they dug under the barns, and they owned them near the central marketplace. They owned the bunkers. And so the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, let their names be erased. They declared Koroloka free of Jews. No more Jews were allowed in the town. At first, they found a cave in the Ukraine called Verteba, 1942. But this cave was a difficult cave to live in because they had no water, they had very poor ventilation, and it was infested with bats. They also saw foxes. And one day, the oldest son, Nissel, he took the baby fox and he tied it up. And when the other foxes saw that this baby fox was tied up, they left the scene. They left the cave and they didn't come back. And the bats, they got used to seeing them in the cave and they did not bother them. But it was not a very good cave because they had no running water. So what they had to do was they had to take the water that was dripping from the stone and put it in cups, and that wasn't enough water for them to survive with. So at night, the men went out and they tried to get water and they tried to get all kinds of different supplies. They had to build beds. They built beds from wood that they were able to secure. Going outside was only at night, and it was very treacherous for them to go outside because they always had the fear of being caught. So this cave, the first cave they were in, it was really a tourist attraction, and the Germans knew the cave. Well, one night, the cave was raided, and the Germans came in. And Bubby Esther, she stood up to the Germans, to the Nazis, and she said the following. She said, and she made with her hands that everyone should be running and hiding. And she stood up to the Nazis and she said, "Very well, you found us. What do you think? Do you think that unless you kill us, the Fuhrer will lose the war? Look how we live here like rats. All we want to do is survive. Just leave us here and they all ran in different directions, and they ran out of the cave, and they slithered through the grass, and they finally were able eventually to be freed. Even Baby Esther, they all ran away, and they were all able to be freed. And then they finally came from the recommendation of somebody who Nissel, the oldest son, knew very well, who lived in the forest. And he told them about this other cave, and it was called the Priest's Grotto. Some of the group was captured, and so the rest of them escaped the first cave from an emergency exit that they dug. In exchange for gold and silver, the Germans were able to save the lives of all those captured, except for 2, unfortunately. And what the Germans said was, we have to show the Führer that we have killed at least 5 people. So you give us the gold and the silver, but you're going to have to find 5 people that we can bury. So the father, the Zaidi, he went with a couple of his sons, and they found 5 people who were already killed, and they were able to secure most of the other people who were captured by actually burying those 5 people who were already killed. This is Baby Esther, and they were looking for a new place to hide. She was strong, she was resilient, she was courageous. They were only simple people, and they were so creative, they were so ingenious. They figured out how to survive in one of the largest caves in the world. So there was a man, Munko Lubudzin, a Polish forester. He told Nissel, the oldest son, about a ravine on a land owned by a priest. And in May the 5th, 1943, they descended into the second largest cave in the world, in the Ukraine. And 38 people went down, and no one had ever set foot in this cave ever, because people knew that this cave was so huge. It was so tremendous. It was so big. People were afraid. They were afraid to go down, and they felt they would get lost if they went down. But these 38 people from this family, they went down into the cave. They descended. Nissel was the first to pull himself down through the sinkhole, and they all descended one by one by one. Of course, the little children were being held by the parents, and they all made this tremendous cave their home for over a year. The Sturmer, Dodick, Kittner families and others would live in this 124-kilometer gypsum cave for a year. So the women and the children never left the cave, but the men would go in search of food once a month at night. The cave had its own water, this cave. It had good ventilation, and the oldest son carried a heavy millstone into the cave, and they used to make unleavened bread. They used to take wheat and grind it with, you see in the picture, this millstone. They used to grind the wheat and they had enough ventilation that they could cook in the cave. I mean, not everybody had a lot of food. It was only meager rations. And so I'll tell you a little bit about who Nicola was. You can continue. So April the 12th, 1944, the families emerged from the cave after receiving a message in a bottle that the Germans had left. The Sturmers and the whole family eventually made a new life for themselves in Montreal, Canada. I think a couple of the people went to United States, but most of them resided in Canada after the war. They actually did not tell the story to anyone. But in 2002, there was a caver, Nicola, and he was looking because he went down to the cave with lots of equipment, and he was looking for someone who survived in that cave because when he went down, Julie, you can put me on now. When he went down, he saw lots of artifacts, and he noticed that people were living in this cave, but not for one day, not for a few weeks, not for a few months, but for a long, long time. And so he had lots of equipment. He came with lots of cavers, and he actually went to the cave and he went to the Ukraine because he was actually trying to find some connections because his family was from the Ukraine. But in 2002, he received an email from a man, and the email said, Western Ukraine Holocaust Cave Survivor. And so he tried to connect, and he finally connected with the Sturmer family. And he was actually amazed, just amazed at what they did, how they survived, how they were able to make a home for themselves. And you know, the Sturmer family, they felt that this cave was really a cave made from God. They felt that God was protecting them in this cave. And the only time they felt, especially the men, when they went out to get supplies, to get food, they were at risk. But otherwise, when they were all in the cave, they felt God's hand. And long ago, people believed that spirits and ghosts lived in ruins and in caves. But they said, no, there were no ghosts here. They said that the devils and the evil spirits were on the outside, not in their cave in the grotto. And so it is quite an amazing story that this family who stayed together, that this mother who protected her family and said, we're staying together. And they knew when they looked around, they knew that they saw their brother, they saw their sister, they saw their cousin. And the last time they would see the sky was not for a year, because even when the men went out to get supplies or to get food, to get anything they needed, they didn't really see the sky because it was all dark. So they didn't see the sky for one full year. They were so used to the dark. And when they finally emerged from the cave, they were closing their eyes. They were saying, Ruth, I can't see anything. The sun is burning my eyes. I can't see anything. They were so used to being in the dark. It took them many, many years to get used to the light, to get used to the sun. It's quite an incredible story. And so Bubby Esther, she wrote a memoir. And she wrote this memoir for all of the family and the future generations, because it is quite a story to be told. But she didn't write the memoir right away, and they didn't tell the story right away. And they only really told the story when these two cavers actually found them. Nicola and Taylor, two men, they found them. They learned about their story. Because they were cavers, they were amazed at this incredible, courageous, ingenious family who were able to make a life in a cave, not for a short time, but for a long, long, long time. And so eventually they did make a movie. There is a movie, and it's actually an amazing movie. You can get the movie on YouTube for free. That's right. And it's called No Place on Earth. That's a name. It's from, I think, Amazon Prime. So I would like now to introduce to you a wonderful lady, Ruth Richter Antflick, and she is the daughter of one of the survivors in the cave. And she's an amazing, wonderful lady in my community in Toronto, Thornhill. And we have a real big privilege to have her here with us on Zoom. So could you access her? Ruth Richter Antflick.
Ruth, you're pinned and ready to go. You just have to unmute yourself. Welcome. Do you see where to unmute yourself? Probably on the bottom left, a little microphone.
Unmute. Can anybody hear me?
Now we can. Welcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now you know I'm really Esther Sturmer's granddaughter because we don't give up. We just don't give up. I have to tell you is that my Machatanista, we were blessed with one daughter. My Machatanista actually came from the same part of Poland to the point that they actually lived a couple of miles away, and they actually knew them, the families, over 100 years ago. So when we started comparing notes and realized this, it was amazing that we all had the same history. But the reason I'm mentioning them is because when she read the book, she was very depressed after she read the book, because understandably, it was not an uplifting story. But when I said to her, you know, there were a lot of bad things that happened, but there were a lot of good things that happened. And it's a story of survival, and it's a story of never giving up. And it's a story of saying, we're going to beat this, and I'm not giving in, and I'm not giving up. And that was my grandmother's mantra. We're not going to the caves. We're not going to the ghetto. We're not doing what they want us to do. And instinctively, she knew that this was no good. And one of the things that she always said to us, and I don't know if you understand any Yiddish and all, but I'll translate it, was "Metur sich nicht losen," which basically means you shouldn't let yourself. And I have to tell you that over 100 years ago, 150 years ago, my great-grandmother must have been some tough cookie to raise a daughter like that, who at the age of 15 was supporting the 9 people in her family, because she could sew. So she was an incredible seamstress. And at the age of 15 was the primary breadwinner. But one of the things that my grandmother said was, you shouldn't let yourself. Well, I am one of 15 grandchildren, 8 girls and 7 boys. My daughter wears a little silver necklace that she got in Israel that says, you shouldn't let yourself. And she's a nurse, and understandably, in these days of COVID, etc., you have to be really, really tough in order to be able to go through it and get through it. And she's truly Esther's great-granddaughter. Do you have any questions? One of the reasons that night that they didn't talk about the story in the cave is because when my Uncle Saul started talking about it, people would say to him, you're a nice guy, but these stories of living in a cave for almost a year and a half, this is something fantastic. Nobody could ever do this. We don't believe you. We think you're lying and making these stories up. So he heard that enough times to finally turn around and say, you know what? There's no point in talking about it. But as a child, we heard about the stories of the cave over and over and over again, because that's who they were. And I have to tell you, they all did very well. My uncles all became very, very successful builders in Montreal. The children, we have doctors, we have lawyers, we have accountants, I'm a teacher, we have dentists, we have social workers, we have decorators, we have builders, we have artists, everybody, you name it, we have them. So we certainly spread our wings and became very diverse. And of course, when we all get together, it's almost like a party. When my grandmother died at the age of 96, she was a great, great grandmother. She was 5 generations. And we were all standing there in the funeral parlor and talking and joking. And my Uncle Sam walked in and said, Bubby died, why are you laughing? And I said to him, Uncle Sam, she was 96. She saw great, great grandchildren. Look how many we are. For this, we have to be happy. We have to be happy and grateful that we had that kind of a mother, that kind of a leader, and that we survived because of her ingenuity and her willingness never to give up.
Can you tell us a little bit about your mother, her story?
My mother was the strongest of the 3 girls. She didn't let anybody tell her what to do because it wasn't a matter of her knowing better. She just had really, really good instincts. And we had the same nonsense with boys and girls and growing up and having teenage problems, et cetera, and she would always say, it's gonna get better. You don't give up. You'll deal with it. You'll be strong and everything will be okay. And I at one point said to her, and I said, how can you keep on saying that? And she looked at me and she said, because that's the way I was raised. That's the way I raised you, because that's who we are. We don't give up. And you can't give up because there's going to be a better day the day after or another day. And we all learn to solve our problems and deal with them. You know, we're just strong people. When my daughter was in university, she was head of Hillel, and they had to do a pub run, which meant that they were going from one pub to another. And she had to have, she wanted a t-shirt. And she says to me, what should I put on the t-shirt? It's a Jewish organization. And I said, I got it. And I said, they tried to kill us. We won. Let's drink l'chaim. And my daughter says to me, what? And I said, well, tell me about Pesach. Tell me about Purim. Tell me about Hanukkah. And she said, okay, you're right. We're not going anywhere. We fight to survive and we're going to be here. And part of it is because of people like you that never will give up and never will forget. And we talk about this because this is our living history. We are all part of this history. And we can never shall we forget.
And it is a great defiance to what Hitler wanted to do, to annihilate all the Jews. All the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren total defiance to what he wanted. Total.
That's right. Revenge is the
And
best, revenge is the best, success is the best revenge. That's what it is. Success is the best revenge.
How old was your mother when
My mother was,
when the war
my
started?
parents, my mother's story was actually not my mother's, their family story was actually quite tragic, because in 1937, 1938, 1939, my grandmother already knew that something terrible was going to happen. And they sold all of their land and their houses, and they were supposed to get on a ship for Canada to be farmers out in Saskatchewan, wheat farmers. They were supposed to leave September the 10th. The war broke out September the 1st. They closed all the borders, they closed the ships, and that was it. And they were stuck. And at that point, my parents were already engaged, and they figured that they would go, my mother's family would go to Canada, and then my mother would send for my father as a fiance, and hopefully bring his parents and his family and brothers and sisters too. Well, we already know what happened. So those were plans. And then they finally got married on Lag BaOmer in May 1940. And my mother just said, I don't know what's going to happen to us, but I don't want to be with anybody else. And this man is the man for me. And my father got hauled into the Russian army and spent 3 years in Siberia, saving all kinds of Jews, because he smeared the leaders, and he knew how to talk to people. He was a very, very good negotiator, and he saved a lot of Jewish people. And they finally both got back together. But they instinctively knew that my mother knew that this was the man that she wanted to be with. And they were together for over 40 years. In the cave, my youngest aunt, Yetta, would lie beside my mother, and they would sing songs and talk about all the things that had happened to them in their youth and how wonderful it was. And I once said to her, weren't you miserable and lonely and scared? So sure, I was everything, but I was also hopeful that with God's help, we would survive and there would be a better time. And she said, and even after the war, everybody was miserable, and they were horrified, and they were broken, and they lost so many parents and whole families and clans. And my mother said, no matter what happens, I have my husband with me, and we both survive, and wherever I am and wherever he is, we will be together, and we will survive, and everything will be fine. And I have to tell you that my mother did not make a step without my father, and my father did not make a move without my mother. And that's it. And that's the way they had their marriage for over 40 years. So
I mean, it's quite unusual after the war that a family of 38 people would be together and survive in this incredible, fantastic, I mean, unreal way. It's quite unusual, because anyone who went to the ghetto, or, you know, eventually they were taken to concentration camps and they were separated. Here they were together, which in itself was so nurturing. It was so wonderful that they were together. It was so incredible. Like I never really heard a story like this, and that's why I, you know, feel so privileged that I know you, and that I've read this story and that I know about this story. It's just incredible. It's just incredible.
Well, you know what? They survived by the good grace of God and by their own wits. And any Jew that survived was by the good grace of God and their own wits. And they had to make a decision, a life-altering decision, and truly life-altering, to take this road or that road, this path or that path. One of my aunts and her sisters landed up hiding in a barn, and they crawled into the straw, and all of a sudden there's a cat, and the cat is meowing and meowing and meowing, and my aunt is, oh my God, she's going to make so much noise that the Nazis are going to find us. And her older sister, who I loved very much, she was Chaya Smuckler's mother, says, let's go and follow the cat. The cat wants us to follow her. And my aunt Charna said, are you kidding? She says, no, we're going to follow the cat. Anyways, they followed the cat. They both survived. They both became great grandmothers. But the next day, all the straw was completely broken up and the barn was totally destroyed. So this little cat saved their lives. And I once asked my aunt, how come you always have a cat? And she said to me, because I want to remember what I survived and what I went through and how grateful we all have to be for what we have.
Well,
And I have
really,
to tell you-
anyone who survived was really from God's hand. Anyone who
Yes.
survived was total miracles, totally.
Absolutely.
And there are so many
Absolutely.
stories, miraculous stories of Hashem's hand in every single story of survival. Can I just
Absolutely.
ask, would anyone like to ask Ruth a question?
No questions?
You can all just unmute yourself. Ask.
No questions? Or nobody
No?
hears me?
Do they hear? Julie?
Yeah, they can hear. Well, I think I have a question. Just
Sure.
did of the little kids, the next generation, the great grandchildren.
Yes.
I assume that you guys are sharing these stories, and did they get a chance to meet your grandmother and your I mean, she lived to 96, I believe you said. Like, do they
96,
have
yeah.
do they have memories? And I mean, just to keep the story going and going, I know that there's a movie, but there's nothing like, you know, the word of mouth and sharing the stories. Like,
My grandmother became a great grandmother in her early 70s. So she lived like
Oh.
another 25 years to meet all of her great grandchildren.
beautiful.
She was actually at the bar mitzvah of her great grandson.
Oh,
Wow.
Okay, which is like
beautiful.
totally unbelievable. And I have to tell you that probably about 10, 12 years ago, I went to my cousin Sonia, who was the older woman in the film, to her grandson's bar mitzvah. At that bar mitzvah, there was the bar mitzvah boy, my first cousin, my aunt, and my grandmother's youngest sister. So there were 5 generations at this bar mitzvah. 5 generations. And my great aunt goes and tells me a story that somebody said to her, oh, when you meet somebody who's in their 20s, oh, you look so nice. You meet somebody who's in their 70s, oh, you're doing well. And then she says, and when they meet somebody like me, they say, you're still here? So, you know, this great grandmother, this woman who would have been a great grandmother at that point, was perfectly clear, had a beautiful sense of humor, and we hadn't seen her in years, and she knew every single one of our faces, knew exactly who was who, and it was just wonderful to see her. So yes, the stories continue, and one of the things that we all learned, especially among the women, is that we are not only cousins, but we are friends. And we do for each other, and we love each other. And some of us are not on good terms with others, because there, thank God, are so many of us. But those of us that are close can't begin to tell you how much they mean to me. They mean the world to me, because I know that no matter what, they will always be there no matter what. 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're all over the place. We're in California, we're down in Florida, we're in New York, my twin brother's in Arizona, I'm in Toronto, there's cousins in Montreal, there's cousins in British Columbia, there's a whole troop of cousins out in Jerusalem. One of them is actually a shaliach in China. So we're all over the place, like Jews, spread all over the world.
Amazing, amazing. Well, you're a real example for all of us, for the world,
And
Ruth.
so are you. So are you. This what you've done to get all of these people together and to put this whole program together. I have two words for you. Yashir Koach, you should have nachas and gesint and the energy to keep on doing this for many, many years because you're one in a lifetime. Your parents, your
I have a
grandparents would be
question.
so
I have
proud
a
of you.
question for Ruth. Ruth,
Thank you.
Yeah.
so I have a question. Maybe you said well, did you ever all go and have a reunion by the cave?
No, we did not have a reunion by the cave, but my two uncles and my two cousins went down to the cave, and my uncles went into the cave, and some of my cousins did go with them, like children and grandchildren did go with them.
Did you
Okay.
ever go? Did you ever go?
No, I didn't go. I was actually the first time that they were going. The first time my aunts and uncles went back to Poland and found the cave, I was pregnant. So there was no way that I was going anywhere.
But Ruth, the cave was in the Ukraine, no?
The cave, yes. But
The cave
in
was
1990, and they went back a few times after that, Shulam and Nissel and Sam all went, and they were just going around in the area of Poland where they lived. Okay.
Right.
And then about 10 years later, Chris Nicola went into the cave and found the writing on the wall, right on the ceiling, actually, not
Amazing.
on the wall, on the ceiling.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting to me that people did not believe the story, because after the war, I know that my mom, Aleha Shalom, she tried to tell her Canadian neighbor a little bit of what they went through. And the neighbor looked at her and said, "What are you talking about? We had to wait in line for butter."
Yeah.
So my
I know.
mom shut her mouth.
I know. There were a
And
lot
didn't
of
say
people,
another word for years. For years, she didn't say
there were a
anything.
lot of people here that said, "Oh, it wasn't so bad. We had it pretty tough here too." And I looked at this person and I said, "You're right. You had Nazis running up and down the street trying to kill you. Is that correct? Is this what you're telling me?" So that
I
shut
know.
them up pretty quickly.
Ruth, this is
Yes.
Shelley. So,
Hello.
hi. So one of the books that Eve uses to teach us for Parshat HaShavua is by a Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And
Yes.
not in that particular book, but in another one that he wrote about, he said there are two kinds of people when they get into a situation. There's the group that has to blame somebody. And then there's the group, and then there's the group that says, okay, we're in this situation. What are we going to do now? And it seems
Yeah.
like her family is very much an embodiment of the seconds. Like, okay, we're running for our lives. How are we going to survive?
Well, you know what? It's very easy to say I give up. And then what? What do you gain when you give up? You lose everything. But if you don't fight, you fight to the very end, always, whatever it is. Whatever it is, if I go into a store and I don't like the way I'm being treated, you better believe that I'm going to open up my mouth and I'm going to get satisfaction, because I'm not going to give up, and I will not let you treat me like this. And as women, we have it even harder. And as Jewish women, it's even that much tougher.
You know what?
And we know that. My grandmother was the original, what is not femme fatale. She was a liberalist. She was a fighter. She was the one that was supporting 7 people at the age of 15. At the age of 15, I was going to dances and having teeny bopper sleepover parties and having a good time. I didn't think about supporting 7 people, my 6 other brothers and sisters and my parents, and having to deal with these Polish women who hated her guts. But she was the best seamstress in town. Damn that Jewish girl. She's better than all the other Polish women. How do you live with that?
I think maybe that's why, when we talk about different empires going away,
Yes.
I mean, all the skills that people had to use and develop just to survive is what ultimately when you talk about Jews as being successful, it's kind of that DNA that really pushed Jews to, make their children's lives a lot better.
Well, I have to tell you, my daughter was in university at Wilfrid Laurier University, which is in Waterloo, Ontario. It's about an hour away from here. And there had been something having to do with Israel. And one of the professors actually came out and said, those nefarious Jews on this campus. And my daughters and the campus police was there, and the newspapers were there, and CBC radio was there, and Chabad was there, B'nai B'rith was there. And my daughter, who is not even barely 5 feet, turns around and says, you can't say that. And the professor looks at her, and there's like 50 people, and this is being recorded live. And the professor looks at her and says, shut up. And my daughter says to him, is that the way you treat your students when you don't agree with them? Is that the way you talk to them? And that just completely shut him up. Okay. And she was 18 years old. She was 18 years old. This was her first encounter with anti-Semitism in your face. And she stood up for it. And she stood up for herself. And you have no idea how proud I was of her. And still am so proud of her. Because she is truly a chip off the old block. And I don't mean me or my mother, I mean my grandmother.
Wow. Wow.
Okay. And I wonder, and when I wonder what kind of a woman my great grandmother was that raised women like this, that could read and write Yiddish, Polish, Ukrainian, Hebrew. They all knew their way around a Siddur very, very easily. And a matter of fact, the woman that where my grandmother lived some of her years, my grandmother was the one that taught her grandson the bar mitzvah parsha for his bar mitzvah.
Wow.
Didn't have a teacher. It was my grandmother that taught.
Wow.
So,
Ruth,
I wonder what kind of a woman my great grandmother was, that she was able to instill these unbelievable characteristics and strengths in all of her daughters. 2 of her daughters left as teenagers to go to America in the 19 teens. Can you imagine? They're leaving their home. They will never see any of these people again. And
Wow.
they did it.
Ruth.
Yes.
I would like to say something here. It is an honor listening to you, because you represent it's the knowledge that there's a root that we share that makes me feel very proud. The concept of purpose and gratitude. I mean, to think about the terrible things that happened to your family, and yet you responded in a way like it was almost a gift. It was an opportunity to show what you're made of. And your willingness to perpetuate that knowledge, to share with others like us as an example of what we should aspire to, is very, very meaningful. I personally feel honored to be here listening to your story, and I thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Let me ask you a question. I'm sure you remember John Kennedy's speech when he said, don't ask what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Okay? This is who we are. Not just me, all Jews. Okay? And one of the reasons that they hate us is because they're jealous. And one of the reasons that they're jealous is because education and family are the foundations of who we are. Always. I have to tell you a very, very quick story. About 15 years ago, my husband was going to be a doctor. He was doing his internship in the Buffalo area, Buffalo, New York. And we went from house to house to house looking for a house that we were going to settle in. And every single one of these places had this beautiful armoire. And I said, oh, these are such beautiful armoires. And the guy says, and this guy was a doctor, he was the head of medicine, and he whips open the cupboard and he says, yes, and this is my gun collection. And I was totally horrified that a doctor should have a gun collection. And I came home and I said to my dad, he says to me, "Nu, how was it? Did you find a place?" And I said, "Daddy, I have to tell you that now I know the difference between us and the Goyim." And he says, "All right, I'm listening." And I said, they had every house had an armoire full of guns. Every Jewish house has an armoire full of books. They have guns, we have books. Am I wrong?
You've captured something there.
Okay, the Israelis per capita are the most educated. I think they're like number 3 behind like Sweden or Norway as far as education goes. Per capita, they have more books in Israel per person than any other country in the whole world. Did you know that?
And more Nobel Prizes per capita.
And Jews have more Nobel Prizes.
More Nobel
So,
Prizes per
you know,
capita.
jealousy comes in many different forms.
Yeah. I have to say one thing before we do the candle lighting. This is in reference to what you were saying about how us Jews stand up tall and stand up proud. After the war, it really, I say, was incredible to see how our parents went through such horrifying experiences, and yet they were not victims. They were not victims. They were true survivors with all the strength and all the power and all the joy that they could take out of their life. So
that's right.
Really, they were not victims. No. They forged forward, and they were a sample for the world, And what they wanted to do was to have their families and to bring the next generations. They did not rely on psychiatrists. There were no psychiatrists for them. They did not rely on a trauma team. There was no trauma team for them. They basically did their own psychological healing.
Yep.
And they did it through having their families and through really forging forward with the power that is totally, totally incredible. And I could say that about most of the survivors that I know, since they were all in a community. I grew up in Montreal, and so did my husband. And they were truly, truly over the top in every way. And there was no fussing about little silly things. My mother, Aleha Shalom, used to say, "What's your problem? You have
That's
food,
right.
You have a roof over your head, you have
That's
clean
right.
clothes. What
That's
is your
right.
problem? What could your problem possibly be?" And you know what? Yeah,
of course she was right.
yeah,
She was, of course,
100%.
right.
100%.
That's it. You know,
Yeah,
buckle up and get over it.
that's right. Pull up your socks and get out there.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to light the candles.
Mom,
Yeah.
I think Hannah was trying to say something.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Hannah.
And the Andrews too have their hand up.
Okay.
Okay.
I am so, Ruth, the story of the cave just really was so interesting. So what was the name of the movie, number one? And number two, I'm really curious, were there any babies born in the cave?
No.
No
baby.
And
No
what was
babies.
what was the name of the movie?
No Place on Earth.
No Place on Earth.
Oh, no.
Yes.
And one other quick question. Do you know and somebody by the name of Sonda Bend, Sonabend, from Montreal?
I went to somebody by that name in high school, like
Was it
50 years ago.
Was it Israel? Do you know?
Yes.
Oh my God. So his wife is from America, and the husband, his name is Izzy, and they're one of my best friends. I'm in Scottsdale, and Regina is my cousin, and she also met them. So
I'm going to be in Scottsdale next week because my twin brother's grandson is being bar mitzvahed.
Oh my God. So you know what? I can send you then from, oh my God, you have to come. Where's I'm sorry, I get off track, but where's the bar mitzvah?
Oh, I don't know. It's in Scottsdale, My twin brother is David Richter, and he has 3 boys, Sean Richter, Corey Richter, and Jeremy Richter. And the 2 older ones are lawyers.
Okay, you know what? Let me send you, I'm sorry, guys, but you know.
That's okay. That's okay.
I get very, in fact, my cousin is Regina. And anyway, so I will text you the phone number of Izzy and his wife, Benita. I'll tell her about you.
Okay, I don't know whether Sam, Izzy would remember me, but I remember the name Israel Sonneban. I remember he was a really nice guy.
He's still a very nice guy. They're like one of my closest friends. I see them.
I have to tell you, growing up in Montreal and going to that high school was a total hoot, because we would send messages and notes back and forth in Yiddish and Hebrew, and the teachers couldn't read the Yiddish and the Hebrew. So, and 90% of the school was Jewish, and of the 90%, at least 60 to 70% of us were children of survivors. So it was not unusual to hear Yiddish or Hebrew in a regular public high school.
Yeah, well, his mother just passed away. I think she was over 100. But anyway, I don't want to take your time, but I will send you my phone number if you want to get in touch.
Yeah. We can connect you, Hannah. Okay. I'll work with Harriette and get the information. Okay.
Yeah. Is there another, anyone else who wanted to ask a question?
We had a quick question. One, how old was the youngest child that was in the cave?
4.
4. And then are there,
and
go ahead.
Go on.
What were there any traditions that were passed down from the survivors in the cave, like a song that they would sing to kids or grandchildren that has been passed down, or a story that they would say at night before bed, or anything like that? Was there like a good tradition that was passed down also from the survivors?
They didn't have traditions like that. Those of us that came from more religious homes, like my father was more religious than some of my uncles, we did the Shema at night. My grandsons do the Shema at night. We all went to Hebrew day school, because Hebrew education, especially Hebrew education, was very important. Very, very important. So there were nothing like that. But I remember my mother used to say that they would lie in the cave and sing songs to keep them, to keep their morale up and learn stuff. And when my older cousin, the first grandchild, Sonia, was about 9 or 10, my grandmother would sit with her by the fire and teach her how to do embroidery, because my grandmother brought a needle and thread, and obviously there were clothes there that always needed to be fixed. And my grandmother took the time and taught my cousin how to embroider, in the hopes that one day you might need to embroider stuff. Okay. And the funny part about it is that a lot of the girls know how to sew very well. And I was making nurses' caps for my daughter and some of her colleagues at the hospital. And I'm in the dining room and I'm cutting the material and I'm talking to my grandmother, and my husband walks in and he says to me, "Who are you talking to?" And I said, "I'm talking to my grandmother because I have a problem here and I need her to help me." And he looks around and says, "Ruthie, I hate to tell you this, but your grandmother died about 25 years ago." And I said, "I know that, but right now I still need her guidance." So is she with us? You're damn right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. She was the head of the family. And when she was already in an old nursing home, she turned around and said that she was the luckiest person on earth, because not only did her children want to help her, they were able to help her. Now, in the mid 70s, they were charging $30,000 a year for one person in the mid 70s. So that's what, 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago. So translate that kind of money now. And when we would go to visit her all the time, because she lived less than 5 minutes away from my mother, and we all lived within a 10-minute drive of each other, the Sturmers are here again. So there would be like 5, 10, 15, 20 of us just hanging around because we went to see the Papa. And that's who we were. And they're like, "Oh my God, here they are again." And we would look at them and laugh. You know,
I
we
just
feel
want to say,
sorry for the people that had no visitors.
yeah, I just want to thank you for reminding all of us about the strength that we all have within inside of us. You know what?
Yeah.
As Jews, we all have this strength, and to remember.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you'd be surprised how resilient your children are. Push
Yeah.
came to shove, you'd really be surprised how resilient they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. And much knockers to your family. It's great to hear the
Absolutely.
great things that are happening for your family.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So I'm going to start lighting the candles. And the first candle I'm going to light for your incredible family.
Harriette, will you tell us why you're lighting a candle and what? I've never heard of that before.
Oh, well, this is because it's Yom HaShoah in commemoration of all those who perished at the hands of the Nazis.
And others.
And I'm also going to, and others as well. There were 6 million Jews, 1.5 million children, and I think other people, gypsies, and they started killing the disabled and also people who were old, people who were young. So maybe 5 million others. So hold on, Julie, how do I'm not sure here. Oh, hold on, I'm gonna turn the camera. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna turn the camera. Can you hold it there to show the candles?
Yeah, I see them.
The candles, yeah, yeah. Okay. So the first candle I'm going to light in commemoration of the Sturmer family and everyone who survived in the cave. Bubby, Esther, who, by the way, whenever I go to the cemetery and I go and see my mother-in-law now, Aleha Shalom, my father-in-law, Aleha Shalom, and some family members, I always pass by your Bubby, Esther. I pass by her mitzvah. Yes.
They're all in a row.
Yes,
right
I
beside
pass
each
by them
other.
all. Yes. So
Yeah.
it's very heartwarming for me knowing this story and feeling such pride in your amazing family. And
Thank you.
I want to also commemorate for you, I think your Zeta, he didn't survive, right?
No.
He was killed after the war. Yeah, I know. So for your Zeta and all those who didn't make it, who were taken away from the cave, from the first cave.
Yeah. That was my grandmother's younger sister and her son.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the first candle. The second candle I'm lighting for Doris Lazarus, who is a docent in the Chicago Holocaust Museum and whose parents survived the war, and for all those of her family who did not survive. The next candle I'm lighting for Elaine Weiss, whose father, and Elaine told me a lot about her father. He survived the war, but a lot of his family did not survive the war, and it was actually very heartwarming to hear that her mother was not a survivor, but yet she must have been very, very special to have the empathy and the patience and the kindness to really understand your dad who survived the war. The next one I'm lighting for Jackie Cott-Wool, who is a granddaughter of survivors. And she actually is an amazing artist. She really has taken her survivor family into her heart and soul and she has the most incredible artwork of all the survivors. And if anyone wants to look her up, you can look her up on the website. It is Jackie Caught Wool. And she has a website, and the pictures that the paintings that she does are just incredible, depicting all the survivors after the war and what she remembers from all of her relatives. The next one I'm lighting is for Regina Brandis, who I was privileged to meet. Regina's parents were survivors, and Regina happened to have lived in Sosnovitz, right near where my parents lived before the war, and they actually lived on the same street.
Wow.
In Poland, Sosnovitz, Poland. And her grandmother, Regina, her grandmother was the fishmonger on the main street with all the Jewish stores, and my grandmother was the butcheress on the same main street. And we were pretty sure that they all knew each other in Sosnovitz on the same street. And Regina lived, I think, in Sosnovitz, Poland until she was, I think, about 17 years old. They lived there for many, many years. And last but not least, first I want to light a candle for, I already lit for Ruth. I want to light a candle for Eve and all my children who
are incredibly
remember
lucky
their
to have a mother
grandparents.
like you.
They
Did you hear
remember
what
their,
I said?
What did you say?
I said for Eve and all your children and grandchildren who are incredibly lucky to have a mother like you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
It's not
For
a matter
Eve,
of being sweet. You are such an anxious child.
Thank you. For Eve and all my children who grew up with their grandparents who were survivors, all of the grandparents were survivors. We always said to our children, you are so lucky to have grandparents. We never had any grandparents. We never knew a grandparent, barely ever saw a picture of a grandparent. And especially the first years, we never really heard too many stories when they really weren't talking. So this is
When I was in high school, and I kept on saying, my grandmother, my baba, my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, my aunt. And finally, I was best friends with this girl then, and I still am, a girl by the name of Debbie Ehrlicht, and her parents were from Warsaw. And one day she says to me, who is this Bubby that you're always talking about? This old woman. What is she, a friend, a neighbor of your mother's? And I said, no, she's my mother's mother. And she turns around and says to me, you have a grandmother. And I said, yes. And she says to me, and all those people that you're saying, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin. And I said, I am one of 15 grandchildren. All of my aunts and uncles survived. And they couldn't, she was like, nobody survived from my family. Absolutely. Israel Sonnabend will tell you the same story, that none of us had grandparents. It was so rare to have a grandparent.
You're right. You're right. And the last candle, I'm dedicating this candle to all those murdered by acts of terror and anti-Semitism in the whole world.
Yeah.
And I can tell you something else. Hold on.
Mom.
Let me just, hold on.
Mom.
Wait a minute. I have to change this. Okay. Yes.
Mom, I just want to mention Elaine, who you lit a candle for, is sitting with her sister. Her sister Harriette, actually.
Okay.
So they're on together. So just in honor of both of you.
Yes, in honor of your parents,
father.
Elaine. And what is your sister's name?
Harriette.
Oh, Harriette. Okay. Okay.
And I'm just looking at this screen, Mom, and I see another very dear friend, Lori Bacalar, who I'm pretty sure I sent you a little blurb about Lori and her family situation. Lori, will you just tell us a little bit, because I'm looking for the beautiful message you sent me. Do you want to just share on the screen?
Just really, no, I was just saying my father was survivor. He was liberated from Auschwitz, and he met my mom in Israel, and she was a child survivor. So
wow.
Yeah, from Romania.
I'm so sorry, Lori. I don't know if I got that message.
Okay. You know
I
what?
apologize.
Don't worry about that. Yeah.
I would like to end off.
Well, Mom,
just
to be totally inclusive, I'm pretty sure looking at the screen, Hannah is also a child of survivors. So
okay.
I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone, but I just want everyone to feel really included, that we're all pretty much connected in our history, and hopefully in a beautiful, bright future that we can all celebrate together, whether this was our personal family history or our collective Jewish history. We're really all children of survivors in every single way as the Jewish people. So I just want everyone to feel represented
100%.
in those candles. Thanks, Mom.
I would like to say that it's true we didn't have grandparents. That's very true. And we barely had aunts and uncles. But on the other hand, the grandparents that our children had, we made sure that the respect was very, very great. And I have to say that our children really lived up to that. And we really let them know how important it was to show full respect, full love, and full care of their grandparents. And they really did. So on that note, I want to wish everybody should be safe. You should be well. You should appreciate all your blessings. And I'm very, very grateful to Julie. Thank you for all the tech. I couldn't have done it without you. And Ruth, I have no words.
Pleasure. Thank you for sharing.
Ruth, I have no words for you.
We have
so
to go
touched.
for a picnic in the park once it gets warm.
Okay, we will. We'll definitely do that. And all the survivors that are still here with us, they should be here until 120. Right. And we should hear their stories. And we should know that a lot of them are leaving us. We should be the ones to be telling the stories. These stories are very precious and very important, especially when the world is saying it never happened. The legacy of who they were, of what they did, and not only what they went through in the war, but who they were before the war, and their vibrancy and their brilliance, and what they accomplished before the war, and who they could have been. And many of them were not allowed to live. Many of them were not allowed to continue their life, and they didn't live. And so we have to do our best as a Jewish community, as Jews personally in our life, to make them proud of us, so that their death should not be to no avail.
Well said. Beautifully
really
said.
Beautiful, both of you. Really, really inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Your community I'm not sure if there are many other people around besides Chicago, but I have to tell you, my husband and I were just in Chicago and for Pesach, and we absolutely fell in love with your community. It's just wonderful. You're wonderful people, and so warm and so loving and so caring and so what can I say? I have no words. So intellectual and so insightful. And I wish you all, you should be well, and you should continue the great things that you're doing.
Amen.
Thank you. Harriette, Yashikoach, you did an amazing job. I know this is not exactly how you had planned it, but it was amazing. Thank you so much.
Can I see who Harriette is? Let me see. Hi, Harriette.
Hi.
I'm so sorry I didn't mention your name. I apologize.
That's
Please
okay. No problem.
forgive
Thank
me.
you. Your words were beautiful.
Thank
Really
you.
great.
Thank
Really
you.
great. Harriet, are you home now?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you are. Okay.
We came home because we were told that it was going to be on Zoom. So I said, you know what? Let's go home.
Let's go. All right. Good.
Yeah.
Glad you arrived safely.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was great
Thank you.
being with you. All
Oh,
right.
it's great. Okay.
Very
All the
nice.
best to
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Hey,
Bye,
Simon.
bye, everyone. Thank you so much for
Bye,
coming.
everyone.
Thank you so much for putting this on
Julie,
Zoom.
thank you so much.
And Sal for driving safely and doing all the
Welcome.
photos on that end. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Julie, for putting this on
Bye.
Zoom.
My pleasure.
Thank you
Harriet,
so
thank you
much.
for
I'm going to end it
inviting
now.
us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It
Great
was an
job,
honor.
Mom.
Okay,
Really, an
Julie,
honor.
Yes,
Julie, is it going to be recorded?
it is recorded, so I will send you a link to the recording.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay,
Fabulous.
good night, everybody. We're sending
night.
our love. And we